It's a given that most neurotypical people generally prefer face-to-face communication over any other form of interaction. In recent months, social media has been overflowing with people complaining about lack of direct contact and the limitations of phones, emails, texts and messaging apps as the world comes to grips with social distancing. One frequent complaint is that without being able to see the person they're talking to, they miss cues from facial expressions. It's well known that received communication is heavily influenced non-verbally by facial expression and body language. It's considered an indispensable facet of communication by many, so they're at quite a disadvantage if those signals don't match the intent behind them. This is a barrier that autistic and neurotypical people frequently encounter when communicating with one another. Traditionally, the problem has been laid at the feet of autistic people having difficulty understanding others. But it's not quite as simple as that. Autistic expressions and body language don't always mean what our non-autistic partners, friends and family members think they do. Today we'll be exploring how facial expressions influence communication, how we form opinions of people, and something called flat affect. How can autistic expressions be different? How do expressions affect communication? And are they really as useful as we think they are? In the last video in this series, we talked about how theory of mind can differ between autistic people and our non-autistic partners, friends and family members. Facial expressions are very closely linked to our theory of mind, which is an assumption of how people feel based on their communication and behaviour. Because facial expressions are a major part of our communication, they must have a significant impact on how and what we think of others. If we're going to make judgments about other people or allow our emotions to be influenced by them, we need to be extremely certain of our understanding of those expressions, or we will make costly mistakes. If you've been online for any length of time, it's likely you'll have stumbled across one of those clickbait quizzes about facial expressions. They show you a model's face and ask you to pick an emotion from a list. Sometimes they just show you a part of the face, like their eyes or their mouth, providing more of a challenge. Most people are surprised by their answers by the time they're finished. They're rarely as good at judging expressions as they think. Yet, we hold expressions in high regard as reflectors of people's true feelings. We judge people's mood and their honesty as much by their expressions and body language as by the words they say, sometimes more so. When we do poorly in such quizzes, we often say to ourselves, well, how is anyone supposed to do well at those tests? You can't tell what expressions mean without context. We like to think that we judge people's reactions and their expressions purely on their individual merits and in the context of the moment. But the truth goes much deeper than that. Our opinions are based not so much on an objective, considered assessment, but on two distinct factors: our expectations and our cognitive bias. Consider this situation. You're chatting with a friend when they say something which reminds you of a funny story that made you laugh out loud. You tell them the tale, and you expect your friend's reaction to look like this. But what you actually see is this. Immediately we're thrown into a quandary because our expectation, our prediction of the future based on our theory of mind has been proven wrong. Whatever our friend is feeling, they are clearly not amused. How we interpret that reaction is going to be dependent on our cognitive bias and our own emotional state at the time. What if the story was about a controversial or sensitive subject? What might we interpret their expression as? It might be distaste. If we felt slightly guilty about the subject matter at hand, we might choose to apologise or make an excuse. On the other hand, our cognitive bias may lead us to believe they're being oversensitive. So we become bullish, taking our friend to task for being judgmental. Are they personally offended, perhaps? Was there something about the story that struck a note that reminded them of something unpleasant in their past? How do we deal with that? They might be confused. Perhaps the joke didn't make much sense to them. Should we explain it? Maybe they didn't hear us correctly. If we could work out the bit they didn't quite catch, we could repeat it. Or we could brush it off with a "you had to be there," or take a more assertive tack and suggest your friend has a faulty sense of humour. What if we're not terribly confident in ourselves? That same expression could mean they didn't find us funny. Why? It was funny when somebody else told it the other day. Did we say it wrong? Was our timing off? Did we misjudge the moment? Maybe they don't really like us. It could be none of those. It could simply be that they were distracted from your hilarious tale by a bad smell, making them wrinkle their nose and grimace. In this situation, we have context, but it's still next to impossible to pin their reaction down based on facial expression alone. If our understanding of another's communication can be that flawed, then our educated guesses on another's thoughts or intentions can be flawed too. Bad data leads to bad results, or garbage in, garbage out, as the saying goes. Many descriptions of autism will list reduced or absent ability in identifying nonverbal signals as being a key trait. We're often slower to draw conclusions on emotional situations due to sensory and processing differences. But are those conclusions actually any worse? One thing many autistic people have to contend with, though, is self-doubt brought upon by years of conditioning from people telling us that we are inferior to others. Even those of us who are diagnosed as adults still share this in common with those who were diagnosed as children. The reason for this is that we so often fall foul of the first part of the process people use to judge expressions. We confound expectations. Our brains sense and process information via different pathways to the non-autistic majority, meaning that our interpretations, our decisions, and the way we express ourselves will sometimes be different to what most non-autistic people have grown up expecting. When somebody experiences emotions that aren't visible in their facial expressions, it's known as flat affect. Many autistic people are seen to exhibit flat affect as the norm. Whether we're ecstatically happy or profoundly sad, our faces can betray very little of the emotional landscape within our minds. It's something you might observe even in me as I present these films. My range of facial expression isn't terribly wide, and I make a conscious effort to appear more expressive because that's what neurotypical people expect. I use my hands a great deal when I speak too, which makes me more animated and helps me to convey my meaning more effectively. I wasn't always like this. When I was a small child, I was very talkative and extremely expressive. I asked lots of questions and my emotions were always visible on the surface. This made people around me uncomfortable. I was constantly told that I should stop smiling because I shouldn't be so happy. I was told off for laughing when I found something funny that other people didn't even notice. I was constantly calmed down when something excited me that others didn't appreciate. Frequently, someone would tell me to stop looking miserable or I'll give you something to be miserable about, and punishment would follow. I went from being a happy, animated child to suddenly being quiet and withdrawn. My emotions were influenced by my sensory world, which they couldn't perceive. And so I, along with millions of other autistic children the world over, learned to hide my emotions because they never went down well with other people. In time, it became habit, and those habits became hardened by growing up into something very difficult to break out of. We wear a mask of impassivity because we learned that our emotions caused us trouble when we allowed them to show. In our cases, flat affect is not some intrinsic trait of autism, it's a reaction to how we've been treated as autistic people. Like many, I'm unfortunate that the neutral face I wear as a habitual mask looks a bit on the angry, frowny side, which leads to people thinking I'm perpetually unhappy. It's even become a cultural phenomenon. RBF, or resting bitch face it's known as when applied unflatteringly towards women. Moody is a word I've heard used about me. Brooding comes up often, as does irritable and depressive. None are true. I'm about as optimistic and positive in my outlook as you can get, but that's not what people see if they don't look past my outward appearance. Some of us have grown up in homes where our emotional exuberance wasn't an issue though, and those people often don't show signs of flat affect. In fact, many are as gloriously expressive of their emotions as adults and as in touch with their unique sensory world as the children they once were. In my own life, I've become more expressive in recent years. I'm lucky to have a strong, trusting relationship that has allowed me to let my guard down and no longer fear that allowing my emotional state to show, or sharing my enthusiasm, joy, sadness or confusion openly, will be punished. I can do so with my neurotypical wife, and slowly it's starting to show in my dealings with others. We only have this trust because we choose to ask rather than assume. We both know that our interpretations of others' non-verbal signals can be skewed. For every time we can get it right in context, we can still get it wrong. The only way we can be certain is to talk, to ask, and to trust the answers. The solutions to overcoming our urges to judge people by their expressions are the same as with mismatches in theory of mind. We must learn to ask people how they're feeling or what they're thinking, and be prepared to accept their answers. When it comes to facial expressions, we can also take a step further and learn to offer information if we realise that we may be giving off signals that can be easily misunderstood. If we know there are situations where our expressions have often been misconstrued, we can choose to let people know we're okay, or that we're not, by verbal means, to save them asking. This is a principle which can help us in all our dealings, not just those with other neurotypes. We allow ourselves to be deceived by liars and con men, by advertisers and corrupt politicians, because we kid ourselves that we know what they're thinking based on their non-verbal signals and our theory of mind, both of which are heavily influenced by cognitive bias. Rather than fall for misdirection, if we ask for clarification, they must answer truthfully or expose themselves as liars. They cannot then blame us for misunderstanding them if they've made a clear, unequivocal statement. Anyone who evades the question or refuses to answer has something to hide. Whether we're talking about long-term or romantic relationships, friendships, or families, hiding our feelings intentionally can be as damaging as judging someone else's feelings incorrectly. If we're to succeed, we must learn to not only ask and to trust, but to be candid and honest with each other. Thank you for watching. If you click up here on the left, you can subscribe to the channel for more videos on autistic life. And over here on the right, you can see another film from this series on autism and relationships, or visit autistamatic.com.